that first Bridgetown meeting, and finance reform has been at the heart of the international calendar since then, whether it's at the Paris Summit or at the exceptional Africa Climate Summit, through the hard work of India's G20 expert group, or indeed within the COP process under the Egyptian presidency and since. I'd also like to call out the work of the V20 finance ministers with their Accra Marrakesh agenda. Now, many of the key priorities with Bridgetown are moving forward, along with other actions such as establishing important country platforms and high integrity, emphasis on high integrity carbon financing. And these were all crystallized within the UAE Declaration of Leaders on a Global Climate Finance Framework. And in all this work, we've set the ambition, and there's consensus now about the direction of travel. We all agree that the MDBs and the IFIs need to be both better and bigger. Working across the system and with the private sector and civil society, we need to get finance to those who need it most, who often face huge impediments, not least of which is cost of capital. So it's time to talk about implementation. It's time to talk about practical steps, innovative partnerships, and we need to turn this ambition into action, which is indeed the theme of the COP. We're turning billions to trillions, and that's what we're talking about today. We've got an extraordinary lineup of speakers. We're going to be opened today by the UAE Minister of Finance. We also have the heads of the World Bank and the IMF, and many of the MDB presidents, all of whom will be talking in concise, I hope, but also very concrete terms about the action they're taking to move us forward. And it's my absolute pleasure to invite our opening speaker to the stage, His Excellency Mohammed Al Husseini, the UAE Minister of Finance.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, it's an honor to open today's event, which is focused on making climate finance more available, accessible, and affordable to achieve our shared ambition of meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement. The international climate finance architecture will need to be fit for purpose to deliver the climate finance we need at the right speed and scale. Fixing climate finance has been a key pillar of the COP28 presidency agenda since the beginning. In this regard, it remains imperative for us to maintain our momentum and build upon our achievements. Regardless of the complexity of the task and the scale of the financing required, each stride towards fixing climate finance will significantly contribute to our shared objective. Moreover, it is important to actively acknowledge our collective accomplishments and not solely focus on our shortcomings. On December 1st, we launched the Declaration of Leaders on a Global Climate Finance Framework. This was developed, championed, and endorsed by the leaders of India, France, Kenya, Barbados, the United Kingdom, the United States, Germany, Ghana, Senegal, and Colombia. The framework offers a set of principles for a climate finance architecture that can deliver for all. It brings together the reform agenda progressed by the Africa Climate Summit, the Paris Summit, the Bridgetown Agenda, the G20 Summit, and many others this year. This framework has three crucial elements. The first is rebuilding trust by delivering on past commitments. On this, we have seen a milestone agreement made at COP28 on the Loss and Damage Fund. Pledges over $720 million have already been made to support countries in dealing with the loss and damage, including $100 million from the UAE. We have also seen the largest ever replenishment of the Green Climate Fund with over $12 billion in pledges. The second is seizing the economic opportunity to climate action. The UAE's $4.5 billion initiative on clean energy in Africa, announced 3 months ago, has already deployed over half of this finance into projects in Africa to support green industrialization and country-owned investment plans for green growth. The third is delivering at scale. At COP28, the UAE has announced a $30 billion climate fund called Altera, the world's largest private investment vehicle for climate action, which aims to mobilize $250 billion globally by 2030, and I invite you all to partner with us in this fund. Additionally, I welcome the fact that MDBs have already delivered a record of nearly $100 billion in climate finance last year, of which more than $60 billion is to low and middle income countries. Moreover, I commend the significant progress MDBs have delivered on the implementation of the capital adequacy framework recommendations. In the past few days at COP28, we have witnessed some good announcements from MDBs. The World Bank announced an increased climate finance target of 45% by 2025, with half to mitigation and half to adaptation, which means $9 billion additional per year in climate finance by 2025. The Inter-American Development Bank announced it will aim to triple its climate financing to $150 billion over the next decade, in line with the G20 MDB expert group recommendations. Many MDBs have announced they will offer climate-resilient debt clauses in their loans that pause a country's debt when it's hit by a natural disaster. On adaptation, I also welcome the announcement from the Islamic Development Bank to allocate over $1 billion in climate finance to countries affected by conflict and humanitarian crisis. These are just a few examples of the good initiatives that have been announced in the past few days by MDBs. Additionally, the IMF has made good progress on supporting climate resilience through the use of special drawing rights. The UAE is supporting the IMF's efforts through our pledge of $200 million to the RST Trust, as announced during COP. The multilateral climate funds have announced yesterday that they will work together to harmonize their standards to increase access to climate finance. These are all steps in the right direction and completely aligned with the principles of the Global Climate Finance Framework that we have launched with key world leaders. In the joint MDB statement released yesterday, MDBs have laid out a vision for better collaboration. MDBs have committed to work through country platforms, develop a common approach for reporting climate results, launched a long-term strategy facility to support countries, and launched common principles for tracking nature-positive finance. Finally, we have been calling to action in IFI's reform since the start of COP28 presidency, and I'm happy to see that this has created positive momentum and tangible action. I invite you all to work towards implementing the shared vision we have launched with the Global Climate Finance Framework, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts on the role you can play in making climate finance available, accessible, and affordable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you so much. And a huge congratulations to the COP team for securing an outcome on loss and damage on day one. I'd now like to invite the heads of the MDBs onto the stage. I think we have a photo opportunity. I hope you're all expecting that. Please do come to the stage. So before we move to the panel section, I'd like to welcome also the COP28 MDB joint statement, which we're celebrating here, that was announced this weekend, and once again sets out what the MDBs are doing to work together and raise ambition in the name of climate action. We'll be talking about that more in a moment. Please do. Thank you. so much, and thank you so much, Minister Mohammed Al Husseini. Thank you to our MDB presidents. I'm now going to turn to our first panel as our MDB presidents, some of them leave the stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have the Managing Director of the IMF, Kristalina, you're staying put. Yes, indeed. We also have Dr. Adesina. I believe you're joining us for this panel. Please do join us. Thank you very much. We have the head of the Green Climate Fund, Mafalda Duarte. We have the president of AIIB, Jinli Kun. We have the president of EIB, Werner Hoyer. And last but not least, our high-level champion from COP27, Mahmoud Muhaideen. Where's Mahmoud? We're missing a couple, but that's okay. Welcome to the stage. So our first panel is an opportunity to look across the MDB and IFI system, and we'll be asking the esteemed panelists where progress they think has been made over the last year and a half since Prime Minister Mottley launched the Bridgetown Agenda. And of course, our panelists are going to be setting out their thinking on the much needed areas of action and implementation, including in the financial model of their institutions, but also crucially in the operating model, and in the good work that's underway on country platforms, already referenced by the Minister, and sectoral transition strategies. And of course, given that 3 billion people are now living in countries which are spending more on debt servicing than on health or education, we must tackle the issue of debt solutions and how we mobilize more concessional capital. And I'm pleased that we're about to do that with a panel that really does work on all of these elements of the system. There's a lot to get through, but I'm going to start with Kristalina Georgieva. I know you have to leave soon, but we're going to try and keep the panel to time. So much of the conversation in global finance focuses on the MDBs, but the IMF obviously has a unique role to play in terms of macroeconomic shocks. And given that these are increasingly going to be related to climate and nature shocks, can you tell us how you think the role of the IMF is going to evolve?
Very significant change in the role of the IMF. Today we are a systemically significant institution in the fight against climate change. Because climate shocks are macro-critical, they affect macroeconomic and financial stability, and the opportunity of the green transition is a pathway to green jobs and green growth. What it means for us at the IMF is that we now integrate climate considerations in our macro analysis, in our stress testing of the financial system, in the data work we do at the IMF, and of course in terms of financing. This is since we got a great start from our minister with specificity. Let me tell you, we have exceeded our target for the Resilience and Sustainability Trust. We are now over $41 billion, with the latest contribution from UAE as well included. We have delivered already in one short year 11 programs. 6 of these programs are in Africa. They're all done with speed. Average time, about 3, maximum 4 months. How we were so successful to move fast? Because of partnerships. We work with the World Bank, with the Inter-American Development Bank, with African Development Bank, so we can identify what are the policy obstacles for countries to move faster to access climate finance. We are very keen to demonstrate that our ability to open up fiscal space for countries is used for structural transformation. First time in the history of the IMF, we provide long-term concessional financing, 20 years maturity, 10.5 years grace period, and we offer it to not only low-income countries at concessional terms, but also to vulnerable middle-income countries. Looking forward, we concentrate on two topics. First, domestic resource mobilization. We know that countries need to raise money domestically even more than internationally. So tax systems, quality of spending, local currency markets. Second, on building more systemic policy work on the key policy obstacles for moving faster on the green transition. The use of harmful subsidies. Fossil fuel subsidies were 1.3 trillion last year. The use of good subsidies, investing in R&D and investing in what the public sector can do to help the private sector move in. And also, we are very concentrated on building the power of partnerships. In every single opportunity, we work with others because together the whole is bigger than the sum of individual parts.
Thank you, Kristalina. And it was really great to hear you talking about longer timelines, which is something that we've heard again and again from countries that are struggling at the moment, and introducing the importance of policy change and having the right fiscal environment. I'm sure many of these things will come up. I'd like to turn to President Adesina now, who I know has been working on a number of key areas to crowd in private finance and raise additional resources through hybrid capital and support adaptation in fiscal policy as well. Can you share some of those? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. You know, I'm actually here very delighted at this COP, because the most important thing is really all about how you do climate adaptation. For us in Africa, that's the main issue, right? How to mobilize that has been at the core of it. So I'll talk about some of the things that we're really focusing on as we are here. So on that particular issue, we launched what's called the African Adaptation Acceleration Program, which is a $25 billion initiative together with the Global Center on Adaptation. It is the largest climate adaptation program in the world. We as African Development Bank, we put today 67% or 64% of all of our financing into climate adaptation. So that's the first thing I want to say on that. The second thing I want to say is we were just coming from a meeting now with Mia Motley and all that on the debt clauses, pausing the debt issue. We are also launching at this particular COP what's called the Africa Climate Risk Insurance Facility for Adaptation, which is a $1 billion facility to insure countries against catastrophic risk events. So that's very, very much important if you're going to do sustainable development. And thirdly is how to support African countries to green their infrastructure. And so we launched also here what's called the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa, which is to mobilize $10 billion to help Africa to green up its space. But to your point on the issue of financial innovations that you're talking about, you know, I welcome the G20 capital adequacy framework. We are responding to that. In fact, most of what they said, we've been responding to even before they said it. You know, for example, the African Development Bank was the first multilateral development bank to do a synthetic securitization. We started that way back in 2016 for $1 billion. We got support from the UK government to do our second synthetic securitization for $2 billion, which freed up $2 billion of headroom for us to invest in climate-resilient infrastructure. And also, we are working on callable capital. Minister, you're here, and thank you for your support on that, because we need that callable capital. But in addition to that, we are also doing the hybrid capital, which is very, very critical for us to be able to leverage a lot more resources. And that's where I want to really end on that and compliment my sister and commend and compliment my sister Kristalina on the SDRs, when she was talking about how we work together. You see, the multilateral development banks are leveraging machines, right? And because of our capital structure, we can take those SDRs. We came up with one with together. Ilan, it's here somewhere. Yeah, hi. To see how we can actually take the SDRs and stretch them and multiply them so that we can complement the great work of IMF with the PRGT and the RST. And well done, Kristalina, for all the work there. That model now allows us, as multilateral development banks, to be able to leverage 3 to 4 times every single dollar of the SDR. I want to thank the IMF for really working closely with us on that. And I think, secondly, it also allows us to be able, it comes for the donors at zero cost, literally, because we pay for the cost of it to the IMF. And thirdly, and we are very, very comforted by this, Kristalina, is that your team assured us that it actually meets the reserve as a quality. So that's really the thing that you have to have for that. So, from Ilan and myself and all the other colleagues on the MDB, I can give you a high five on that. We can move on this. We hope that we have to concretize this before the IMF meetings in April. And if we do that with our leverage, I think, Kristalina, we can probably even think of jiggling the SDR name. Maybe we might call it supporting development revitalization, and that's also SDR. So thank you very much, Kristalina. Really appreciate that.
I don't think I've seen a high five on an MDB panel before. That's definitely an innovation at COP28. I was really pleased to hear you talk about debt pause clauses, President Adesina, and I can say, AJ in the front row, and thank you so much for putting debt pause clauses, not just in future, but considering also existing debt. It's such an important piece of liquidity support there. And again, you referenced partnerships, so I hope that's going to be an ongoing theme of this panel. And I'd now like to go to President Leachin of the AIIB, which has cemented itself as a vital part of the ecosystem. And your new climate action plan, I have to say, is shows your role as a real innovator in areas like blended finance and debt market innovations. And we've heard about collaborations with GCA between MDBs and the IMF, and now you're also considering work with philanthropy, as I understand it, as well. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to let you know, while at this moment I'm talking here, our staff are working on the ground in many countries who are our members. We need actions. We need to translate what we are committed here to reality, to the tangible results. Briefly, 2 points. One is the MDB is working as a system, and we have also contributed. Over the last couple of years, we have strengthened the cooperation, but I would say the joint commitment in Marrakesh is really a boost to the team-up spirit. We work as a team, and we support each other. We share the same objective, and we have the same vigor and vitality to do what we are required to do. With regard to what we've been doing in this bank, and as you know, we have the first climate action plan, which would guide the management and the staff in a way we ramp up our efforts to help our members to achieve climate objectives, particularly adaptation, mitigation, and overall environmental ecosystems improvement.
Tumaliza Smart 24 TV, mwe bali kubatenga mtugesepo mu programu ya Uganda